Well, hello again, everybody. This is yet another episode of Notes from the Pastor Cave. And first of all, I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas. And you might notice just a slight change here, and it's because of a Christmas present. I now have this microphone right here that you can see a little bit of. So I'm no longer wearing the headset mic. So we have this microphone, and of course this is just connected to the microphone so that I can hear myself talk. And so here we are approaching another new year, and we started just before Christmas. We started in Exodus chapter 3, and I kind of promised you a long journey that really goes into chapter 4. And it has to do with God's opening communication with Moses that leads to Moses going off and doing what he's called to do in freeing the Israelites from the domination of the Egyptians and bringing them eventually back to the land of promise, really where they belonged. It started. We just kind of got started a little bit the other week. Then I did a little Christmas interlude that I hope you enjoyed. So Moses is now keeping the flock of his father-in-law. He's a shepherd now, and he's off in the wilderness, the west side of the wilderness, and he comes to a mountain, Mount Horeb, which becomes known as the Mountain of God. There are several of those. And then it says in verse 2, "And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed." Okay? So there's kind of four things that happen here in succession. We're only going to get to two of them today. But there's four things that happen in succession here. And so the first thing is that Moses, here's a little note. Get it right here. Right. Moses seems to, notice I've underlined seems, because he doesn't know at the time. Moses seems to encounter something natural, okay? So it would definitely not be strange for combustion to take place in a dry region, in a dry land. Anybody who spent their time being a shepherd would know and would understand that there are these times when natural wildfires just break out and break forth, and those kinds of things. So the first thing would have been is that he would have seen this fire, and he just would have said, "Hey, that's a fire. I'm going to go check it out and see what's going on over there." And so it seems to him to be a natural thing. And the thought that I want to connect with that today is this: don't discount God speaking in the natural world. Don't discount God speaking in the natural world. Lots of times we end up kind of looking for something supernatural. We feel like we need something supernatural in our lives. And so we look for something supernatural to happen, when lots of times God is speaking to us quite simply through the natural. I realize that we want to make a delineation between what we call the supernatural and what we call the natural. But let's face it, God has made the entire world, which makes it, in a sense, supernatural. Okay, so I think of the verse that says, "The earth is the Lord's, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof," right? So it all belongs to Him, and so very often God wants to speak to us just through the natural of what He has made, of what He has created. I remember that my father used to hold his newborn grandchildren in his arms, and on several occasions, he looked at me rhetorically and said, so you don't believe in miracles, right?" So, anytime, there's nothing more natural than a newborn baby, but it's a miracle. It is something that exists in the supernatural. Even though it exists in the natural, it certainly is something supernatural, because God has done this thing. God has created this thing, and so we have what seems to be just a burning bush, which could happen at any particular time, and yet, and I'll talk about this in a minute, it's God beginning the process of speaking to Moses. And let me just put another little plug in there. That I think that sometimes God wants us to remove ourselves to creation, remove ourselves to His creation. You know, I used to have a certain beach that I would walk upon. Growing up near the ocean, I used to have a certain beach that I would walk upon when I had to make a big decision, when I had to make a big prayerful decision. It wasn't that I hadn't prayed about it beforehand or wasn't thinking about it beforehand. But when I got there, it just allowed me, when I was just surrounded by nature, in this case, the beach and the ocean, it allowed me just to kind of clear my head, and it was just me and God and God's creation. And as I said, some of those really big decisions of my life, particularly in the early years, were made that way. And sometimes we need to do that in order to see God in a situation. And in order to find out what God wants to say in a certain situation, I always recommend just, getting away, just getting someplace, if you can, getting into the woods somewhere, getting to a scenic overlook somewhere, getting to the ocean, the pond, the lake, wherever there's a scene of God's natural beauty. And I really believe that the Lord has a way of speaking in those places, just because it clears out so many other things. And I think the psalmists really back me up on that. But then now there's a second part to this. So the first part was that Moses seems to encounter something natural, okay? But part 2 of 4 is that he turns aside to see what appears to be beyond the natural. Okay, so he gets to the point where he realizes that there's something beyond the natural that's going along here, and he turns aside to it. Okay, so when we are seeking God in our lives, when we want God to be active in speaking into our lives, one of the things that we need to do is we need to keep up a natural spiritual curiosity. Okay, and one of the parts of kind of falling asleep in our faith is to lose that natural curiosity. Am I thinking? Am I waiting for God to speak? Am I waiting for God to say something into my life, or have I just kind of shut down? Right? And I find that one of the really exciting things about being a believer is what's God going to do next? What's He going to say next? We can all talk about 2020 was such a tough year, and it was for a lot of people. But there's the exciting part of that, and the exciting part of that is what's God going to do next year? We've had a time of trouble. We've had a time of sifting. That's always followed by a time of blessing. What does that mean? What does it mean for the world? What does it mean for the believer? So we need to kind of keep up a natural curiosity. We need to turn aside to see the things of God that God is producing, that He wants to take place, that He wants us to see. And that's kind of my last point with this today, is that even in this process, God has not actually physically said a word to Moses yet, and yet He is already communicating before He is speaking. And there's a lot to that, because a lot of times God is speaking to us, but He's not verbalizing to us, so we don't think that God is speaking. And we're like, oh, God doesn't seem to be saying anything. And maybe it is that God is speaking a lot. Maybe God is saying a lot, but we're just not picking up on it because we're not listening for the sign language. We're not listening for the communication that God does before he speaks, because the lines of communication have already been opened up by God before God had anything to say. So, verbally. So, anyways, that's it for today. Next time around, we'll look at points 3 and 4. Okay, so that was number 1 and number 2. And I pray that you have a great day and that the Lord would bless you. And just remember that we need to let majesty flourish. Have a great day, and God bless.